So I'd like to go into a few items here today. So first, I'd like to get into really the importance of data integrity, how the environment, the regulatory and compliance environment are changing, what are current expectations for data integrity in our industry, what are typical audit approaches that we are seeing, outcomes and potential costs of the observations that an organization might receive from a regulatory body, common gaps and vulnerabilities that we're seeing in company programs, and then the elements that make up a solid data and governance program for your site or global organization. And finally, talking a little bit about digitization strategies into the future. First of all, data really is ubiquitous in everything we do. It really is our global language in pharma. Data integrity is really required to demonstrate assurance in trust in that data. And it's very necessary for us to be able to produce the products we produce and give the solutions we do to our clients, to our customers. All right, data has been growing over time as we implement more technologies and build more systems into our organizations. We're finding data really everywhere in our operations, from the laboratory to manufacturing, utilities, upstream, and of course in development and clinical trials, downstream and pharmacovigilance, and all of our operations to distribute product throughout the world. Data is really required in all of those areas. It has long retention times now. We expected to keep that data for a long period of time, and it's growing in really disproportionate quantities. Not only that, but as we weave that data through our business processes in our operations, we have more people creating data, more people using data in all kinds of ways. And that data takes longer and longer paths through its life cycle, from the point that it's created to the point that we ultimately archive that data for long-term retention. We are doing more and more analysis on that data, whether that's relating the data, transporting the data, combining, transforming the data, representing the data in many different ways. And we're also finding that that data, as we do that, has more nuanced context and meaning. It's very important to make sure that we understand that context and meaning as we move the data through its life cycle. And we have increasing expectations at the same time for the integrity of all of this data. How do we maintain this data in a state where it's always meeting Alcoa Plus expectations and requirements? All right, regulators, both FDA and EMA, understand the importance of data, and simply speaking, they've made it one of the important strategies for their organizations in the near and midterm future. They understand how data is absolutely essential, and the integrity of that data is essential for regulating the industry and for the industry to be able to demonstrate the efficacy and safety of all the products. So both the FDA and EMA have been taking measures to expand their guidance in how the industry can implement good practices for managing that data. And they are expanding also their oversight to make sure that the programs in place are meeting their current expectations, and that the industry is able to demonstrate with assuredness that the accuracy and completeness of the data they are using to support, right, the production and quality and efficacy of the products. There are a number of guidelines out there. There are a number of strategies. Bottom line is agencies are really encouraging the industry to build good data integrity and governance programs, and to use advanced technologies such as automation, analytics, and AI as part of their strategies for managing data. And the guidelines and such that they are putting out are really intended to help the industry move forward in this space. Over the last years, as we have said, there is an increased focus by the regulators on data integrity. It's been quite a consistent topic, but in our experience, we are seeing an increased focus on data integrity related observations, an increased percentage, let's say, of data integrity related observations in the activities that we're seeing by the regulatory bodies. There's been a slight, as the graph on the left shows, there's certainly been a slight rise over the time in data integrity themes. And there's been a number of organizations looking at this closely. For example, on the right, I show a chart of data integrity related themes in warning letter activity. This was actually done by doing a bit of a research on all of the warning letter observations using natural language processing. And what that has told us, this was done by Retica, by the way, what this has told us is that between 50 and 90% of the warning letter observations that have been put out recently by the agency have a data integrity related theme. So what has really changed over the past years? As we see it, quite simply, it's the current good manufacturing practices that has really been shifting. The regulations themselves have not shifted a whole lot in recent times. There have been and are continuing to be new guidelines being established to increase clarity on how to interpret the regulations, but really it's the application of the regulations and the expectations that are changing. And this really is a shift towards management of data integrity risk. ICH or QRM quality management for DI. Evidence that data integrity risk is providing evidence that data integrity risk is holistically managed and demonstrating a good set of governance and controls over the integrity of the data. So it's moving from auditing for errors or issues in the data to auditing for control and management of risk. And this is a different kind of approach and look, and it requires that we as organizations build a different set of programs that are more oriented towards risk. All right, so typical audit approaches are becoming more common, really include direct on-system reviews of raw electronic records, comparisons of records across different systems for consistency. So what do I mean by this? It might mean looking at your paper records, looking at the electronic records that may be related to those paper records in various systems. This could be control systems on the manufacturing floor, laboratory instruments in the lab. It could even be looking at ancillary systems such as security management systems and looking for consistency in time and date stamps, people performing the work, results that were attained across these various systems. The agencies are beginning to more and more look directly at audit trails, and they will take a very simple approach of asking questions for things that look interesting and finding how the organization is able to explain and respond to the things they're seeing in the audit trails. They will review electronic and paper systems for weaknesses in preventative and detective controls, such as weaknesses in security, ability to access the raw data directly and or maybe change or delete that data without authorization or detection. They'll be looking at levels of quality oversight around data integrity, and that quality oversight can be built into your quality systems in many different ways, and I'll be talking more about that. They also review potential opportunities for loss of GMP data, both electronic and paper. So they'll be looking at your destruction programs, your retention programs, your backup and archival programs for your electronic systems and such. Recent observation language is getting, let's say, broader in its impact. So in the past, we might have seen a lot more observations fairly focused, maybe on a single system in the laboratory. That is quickly translating today to broad general statements that we're seeing in observations or in cover letters to warning letters, for example. And those include words like, there is no adequate data integrity program in place to include a statistically sound, comprehensive review of all electronic data. Or things like supervisory oversight is deficient, or your quality system does not adequately ensure the accuracy and integrity of your data. And it's these observation language that are in our observations really resulting in a substantially higher cost to address and remediate the observations and to get substantive programs in place as a result. So these types of citations can drive more significant costs, as I just said. So response activities that we have seen include all kinds of activities, including site-wide assessments of controls around computer systems, reviews of quality and responsibilities and oversight across the QMS system, potentially historical reviews of data for completeness or accuracy in support of the quality of product that's already on the market. Full assessments of quality of produced product, as I just said, interviews of personnel, adjustments of GMP responsibilities, and even if for companies that have applications in process or that have been submitted, rather detailed assessments of application data for integrity. And this is really another level of effort, which really drives a full review of each and every result that goes into an application, following that result all the way back to all of its source data in all forms. So those types of responses can get quite costly. And this is why it's really important for a company to begin to build, if not already, good programs and to have these in place. So a lot of the missing program elements we see are really that companies don't understand where the C in CGMP is going and how it's being interpreted today by the regulatory bodies. Having this formal program for data governance, governance being the processes that ensure data integrity, having this formal program of data governance built into your QMS systems at the top level and working all the way down to the hard preventative and detective controls at what I call the working level, and we'll talk more about that. But making sure we've got that systematic process in place, that process is risk-based, holistic in scope, and includes all GXP data. This is where the agency is looking. It's no longer about the lab or even just about manufacturing. It's all GXP data. So we see them looking in facilities, utilities, and equipment areas, and upstream and downstream in development and downstream, pharmacovigilance. Really, to do this well, it has to be a cross-functional, multidisciplined approach. This is not about a single element of your organization, like quality or information technology doing the whole program. We find that it takes many disciplines from data experts, system experts, process experts, quality experts, technology experts to build a good program and to manage it well. It takes an integrated follow the data approach, understanding your life cycle of your data and understanding everywhere that data is moving through your organization so you can ensure that at all points that data is adhering to Alcoa Plus principles. And it's putting an equal focus on all data in all formats, including paper and digital, and how that data moves between those formats as it goes through its life cycle. We see QMS processes that aren't speaking to data integrity, and we see organizations that maybe aren't communicating and talking in a way that is showing data as being important and data integrity as being important. We don't see the discussions about data integrity in quality review meetings, in metrics, in internal inspections, maybe in deviations and other quality management system, processes, and evidence. And this is where it's really important to begin building into the organization that at all levels, really, the ability to speak about data in terms of its quality, its accuracy, and its completeness. And the more that happens, the more the organization will be tuned in to doing this naturally and making it a part of really sustainable activities by design, if you want to say that. Typical vulnerabilities we see include lack of clarity of responsibilities, lack of quality oversight over data in various parts of the processes, a lack of attention to segregation of duties, which are really important, particularly in computer system security, to make sure that to provide those additional, let's say, preventative controls or separations that are needed to assure that the data has integrity. Operating system vulnerabilities, data retention and permanence aren't often defined well enough or challenged well enough, or processes built to ensure that the data is in fact retained and is permanent for the required retention time. This gets back to backups and archives, for example, whether those processes are truly understood, they are exercised well, they're challenged, and it's the organization knows how to get the data back from a backup situation in a timely manner, and so that the data is accurate, complete, and usable in its original context. So it's good to always start off by asking, when you're building a data integrity and governance program, what is your company's risk? Is your critical data well defined? Do you have and understand all the points in your processes where you have to have data integrity related controls? Are requirements and concepts built throughout your quality systems? Do you communicate it and talk about it in your organization? Do you really understand how to translate and apply good documentation practices, but even more importantly, Alcoa Plus concepts to that data in all points in its life cycle? Are the electronic records well defined and understood? Have you even assessed data integrity and the level of assuredness that you have in that and your risks in your organization? Do you see indications of data accuracy or completeness or data quality issues? Do you see that in your current quality system measurements, like in deviations or in KPIs or in batch record reviews or laboratory record reviews? And do you look at this in your audits, internal audits, and what has the results been from external audits done by potential third parties or regulatory bodies? So when we look at the elements that make up a really good data governance program, it's important to think in multiple dimensions. So really, it's important to think about the elements of people, because people are what make the programs work, and it's people's activities and actions that make for either a strong or a weak program. So really, things have to start with making sure our people understand what is data integrity, and what kinds of governance do they need to be responsible for implementing and affecting to assure the integrity of that data. Processes are really important. You have to understand your processes, where there are vulnerabilities in processes, and what kind of controls are needed to assure that data integrity. Systems are also really important. As more and more of the data becomes electronic, we need to leverage that technology to assist us to make sure that data is maintained in a safe state. And finally, it's all about culture, putting all of this together. It's how the organization talks, acts, thinks about data. Do we understand where there are risks and pressures? Are we identifying those, reacting to those? Are we improving? So are we detecting, measuring, and improving in a continuous way our ability to maintain our data in an integral way? And what we see with the best programs are really a layered type approach. And this starts with making sure you've got a really strong set of policies, programs, and or, if necessary, remediation plans at the top level, giving a full definition of data governance, how you see data governance being woven into the organization, how you see the governance addressing all of those 4 dimensions I just spoke about, and at the lower levels. And then that translates down into making sure you're building data governance into all elements of your QMS. I'm just showing 20 different boxes here of typical quality processes and areas. But if you think about it, the QMS is a fantastic framework upon which to enhance and build data governance specific activities, requirements, and guidance. For example, making sure that you have data integrity specific checks going on in your internal audits, making sure you're categorizing deviations and investigations with root causes or contributing causes that could be data quality related, and you're able to trend those and understand those. Making sure that you're considering data quality improvements in your CAPAs and in your change controls, thinking about how you manage data quality in your annual product reviews. We can keep going through all of these, right? Paper controls, training the organization to understand what data integrity means, making sure that there are strong codes of ethical conduct that are connected with the management and handling of data by your organization. These are all areas where it's really important to build in good governance and demonstrate that you're thinking about data in all elements of your quality systems, and you're building in the appropriate oversight, which is really also important. And then at the bottom level, it's really important to make sure you've got good process level controls. These are the processes where the data is actually created in the laboratory, in manufacturing, and where the data is systematically moved through processes, ultimately to those really important GMP decisions down the line, such as batch dispositioning and release, or the issuance of a C of A, for example. And this is where it's really important to understand how that data is being handled in those processes, to understand where the vulnerabilities in those processes are, and to systematically implement as needed good preventative types of controls that stop the data from potentially being mishandled or from being inaccurate or incomplete, and or detective controls where you can at least understand if those kinds of things may have happened. So it's thinking in those 3 basic layers. And as we're going through that and building that, it's always good to understand what drives data issues typically in an organization. And the fraud triangle is a great tool to use when we're thinking about that. This was originally developed really for the finance industry as a way to think about financial fraud, but it really applies to anything. So these are 3 drivers that encourage organizations to sometimes handle data in ways that are high risk. When there's a lot of pressure on the organization will maybe try to take shortcuts in order to deal with that pressure. Shortcuts can result in additional risk to our data. Also opportunity. If our processes don't have good preventative controls in them, then that is opportunity to do something with the data that is high risk. And rationalization. If our culture doesn't think data is important and data integrity is important and other things are more important, whether it's volume or delivery or project completion or whatever it is that's driving the organization, organizations and people can rationalize changing behaviors and actions in order to meet those priorities. So we have to make sure that as we're building our controls and building the culture of our organization, we're thinking about how the organization naturally reacts in these 3 ways. And ultimately, it is management's responsibility to make sure that we've got great data governance programs in place. Senior management need to be accountable for the implementation of these data governance and integrity systems to minimize the potential risks to data integrity. And each firm really should have a strong data governance system, which again is defined as the arrangements to ensure that data, irrespective of the format in which it is generated, is recorded, processed, retained, and used to ensure a complete, consistent, and accurate record throughout the data lifecycle. All right, so a couple quick items here before we finish up. The follow the data approach, it's really important to walk through your processes independent of whether the data is electronic or paper. Start where the data is generated and where those key decisions are made, those GMP decisions, and trace your data throughout that life cycle as it is created, combined, transformed, stored, moved into electronic systems, out of systems, onto paper, etc. And at each step, ask yourself those Alcoa questions. Is this data meeting all of those requirements? This is where you will find out where you might have vulnerabilities in your processes, and then it's from those vulnerabilities you begin to build good CAPA programs to improve the robustness of those processes. And in the case of detective controls, this is also a great way to define for your audit trail programs what you need to look at in your audit trails, based upon a systematic review of where you have vulnerabilities. We find this often in our audit trail reviews, and I'll talk more about that later. All right, so as I just said, really understand the data flows, follow that data forward and backwards, verify Alcoa, identify any issues or risks really to accuracy, completeness, or consistency, and build up your improvements and corrective actions around that. All right, so the last slide, it's really important. Make data integrity a specific and explicit objective in your organization strategy. Include building a holistic risk assessment process with your new technology adoptions. I think that's really important. Think beyond the boundaries of the technology you're implementing. Look at the entire process that technology is fitting into. It's really important to pay a special attention to hybrid environments where you're dealing with paper and electronic systems. In our experience, we see a lot of data integrity risk is at the boundaries where data is moving between various environments, and that's where it's not being handled with appropriate levels of controls. Reevaluate, build this into your change control strategies to reevaluate data integrity risks when those environments change. For example, the implementation of a new computerized system or a major upgrade or change in process. This is another big one. We really need to expand our computer system validation programs to really think about data and to challenge the accuracy and completeness of data. It is really the ultimate goal of a computer system is to handle data, right, in a way that assures its integrity throughout its life in the system. And if we design our computer validation programs with that in mind, I think we can really improve the value they deliver in this regard. We often see a lot of gaps in the way computer validation challenges computer systems, in that in the end, we don't see a robust enough challenge of just simply the management of the data itself, accuracy, completeness. Measure and expect Alcoa compliance at every step in the life cycle of your data. So you need to always ask the questions, and we need to get our teams throughout the organization comfortable in asking those questions of data that's passing across their desktop every time. And with each adoption, be prepared to re-optimize the end-to-end process. I think it's really important to look at where the controls are, because as you implement technology and automate things over time, that will change where the types of controls you need and where those controls are in the process. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I think we can transition now to questions and answers.